RCTV Studios offers quality summer programs for kids and teens. These programs are ideal for the budding actors and actresses of the world, as well as the future directors, sound engineers, and more. Students receive training on the most up-to-date studio equipment around, from high-definition cameras, chroma key, and Final Cut Pro, just to name a few. Workshops are available for kids and teens ages 10 to 17 and range from stop-motion animation to music videos, TV production, and filmmaking. For more information, visit www.rctv.org.
Candidates, please welcome Catherine Robertson of the Reading Post. Next, let me explain the ground rules. Each candidate will be invited to make an opening statement of no more than 2 minutes. We've drawn lots to determine the order. All the questions are of a non-personal nature and answerable by all 3 candidates. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Additionally, each candidate will be afforded the opportunity to make 2 rebuttals sometime during the forum. You can use them anytime, but remember, there are just 2. We have a timekeeper who will display a yellow sheet when there are 30 seconds left and a red sheet when it's time to stop. The moderator will rotate the first responders for each question. In fact, I'll mix it up a little bit so you're not always following the same person. Each candidate will then be invited to make a 2-minute closing statement. We'll keep the same order as we did for the opening statements. RCTV is showing the event live. It will also be streamed live and it will be recorded and shown several times between now and Election Day, Tuesday, March 5th. Excuse me, March 5th, you're right, I'm sorry. To watch the forums on RCTV's public access channel, you can go to Verizon's Channel 9 and Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 31 or HD in 2131. All right, with that, I think we are ready. So we drew lots, and first up is Dana Garino. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Dana Garino. I'm running for one of 2 school committee seats. I have 3 children in Joshua Eaton right now. They will all attend Parker Middle School and then later attend RMHS. Some things that you can expect with me is someone who is passionate, diligent, honest, and persistent. With me, you will never see any hidden agenda, and what I say is what I mean. Growing up in this town, sports were a large part of my life, and they helped me foster understanding on teamwork and leadership. I had a great privilege of playing on one of the Super Bowl winning teams, and it was an experience I will always cherish. Having gone through the Reading Public Schools 20+ years ago and now experiencing the district as a parent, I can see progress that has been made in town, but also I see areas that we can improve on. I graduated from Springfield College with a Bachelor's of Science with a major in psychology and a minor in chemistry. I then later graduated from Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Science with a Master of Science in the Physician Assistant Program. Over the last 15 years, I've been working in orthopedics at my current practice at Sports Medicine North in Peabody. What I would focus on if elected at school committee would be providing students with the opportunity for success and failure. Working on meeting the child where he or she may be and then maximizing their mental and emotional capabilities. Transparency and communication between teachers, administrators, and parents would be a top priority. Fostering the culture of resilience and excellence so the children can flourish in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next is Sarah McLaughlin.
Hey, thanks, Alan. Thank you, RCTV, for hosting us tonight, and Alan and Catherine as well. Apologies in advance. I'm getting over a cold, so cough drops and water at hand. My name is Sarah McLaughlin. A little bit about me. I have a master's in public health, and the majority of my career has been spent in the health technology field. I'm a longtime Reading resident. We moved back to town about 15 plus years ago to raise our daughters here. It's always been really important to me to be involved in our community, and in many different ways over the years. I've volunteered. I've led the Girl Scout troop, coached lacrosse, served on the Barrows Wellness, Allergy, Safety, and Health Committee, served as a town meeting member. I acted as the chair of the CPAC, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, for several years. Currently, I volunteer with the PSST, the Parents Supporting Student Theater, which is the parent booster group at our MHS for theater. And most recently, obviously, I've been a member of the school committee for the past almost 3 years now. Why I ran for school committee and why I'm running for re-election hasn't changed. Much like anything that requires a significant time commitment, you really need to have a strong motivating factor that brings you back meeting after meeting, late night after late night. And for me, that's always been supporting Reading Public Schools and achieving excellence, particularly academic excellence. Over the past couple years, we've achieved a lot as a highly functioning board and central office. A few of the highlights that I'm most excited about, we purchased and rolled out a new evidence-based K-5 ELA curriculum that aligns with the essential components of reading, which is an area of personal passion and interest for me. We established a path forward to free full-day kindergarten in the district. We kicked off the Killam School Building Committee and Building Project, and we funded several positions critical to our district's growth. I'm excited for the opportunity to continue the collaboration in the coming years with my committee members and amazing district leadership team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Sean Brandt.
Great. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Katie, and everyone here from RCTV for having us as well. My name is Sean Brandt, and I'm seeking re-election to the school committee. I've been on the committee for 4 years after first serving a one-year term and then being re-elected to a full term alongside Sarah back in 2021. In short, I'm seeking re-election because I'm very proud of the work that I and the committee collectively have done during my 4 years. We recruited and hired Dr. Milicheski as superintendent, who's among the finest municipal leaders in the state. While serving as chair of the school committee last year, I had the opportunity to negotiate a long-term contract extension with him that will keep him here through at least 2029. As a longtime champion of moving to universal tuition-free full-day kindergarten, I'm pleased to report we've been building it into our budget over the last few years, reducing the tuition, and finally by the fall of 2025, expect to welcome our first class of tuition-free kindergartners. 4 years ago, I sat in this very studio and was asked how we could possibly afford it, and here we are on the verge of doing it. We've also implemented new reading and math curricula at the elementary level. We're making tremendous strides in modernizing our programs and offerings at the secondary level as well. And perhaps most importantly, we've been a very high-functioning committee that's able to move past our disagreements and work collaboratively on our shared priorities. I've had the privilege of serving as either chair or vice chair in 2 of the past 3 years, both times alongside someone who doesn't always vote the same way that I do. And we've been able to do some really great work together. I'm very proud of all that we've accomplished in the district, excited to hopefully have the opportunity to keep contributing to all that positive momentum. My 3 daughters are still in elementary school. I've got 1 in kindergarten, 1 in 3rd, and 1 in 5th. And so as I've said many times before, I have a ton of skin in the game. I'm grateful for the opportunity to run again, grateful to be here with Sarah and Dana, and looking forward to the discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we will now begin the questions. Catherine Robertson, the first question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. One of the primary tasks of the school committee is to set district policy. What Reading Public School policies do you think may need to be reviewed in the next few years, and why?
And we'll begin with Sean.
Yeah, so one policy that I think is likely to become before us fairly soon is the policy on facilities naming. And forgive me, but I don't recall the letter code of that policy. It might be FF, if I'm not mistaken. And the policy on facilities naming has a fairly stringent set of requirements for whom a facility can be named after. It essentially has to be somebody who specifically contributed to education here in Reading. There are many in town who think that that policy is too restrictive, that it doesn't include people who've made other significant contributions to life in Reading or to education more broadly, and would like to see us sort of expand that scope. And I think that's one that's likely to come before us at the school committee soon, and should certainly be reviewed.
Thank you. Same question, Sarah.
Sean stole my answer, so I will just second that one. I think that's been a policy we haven't reviewed in a number of years, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. I know there'll be a lot of different points of view, but I appreciate that our board has been really good at having thoughtful conversations, respectful, bringing and listening to each other's points of view.
Okay, and the same question, Dana.
So one of the policies that kind of struck home with me recently was attendance, and when a child moves midway through their school year, and I read through the school committee policy, and so as a policy right now, if a child moves midway through a school year, you have to get approval from the principal and then the superintendent for them to continue their curriculum over the year. And so for me, I've actually had this experience with friends of my kids, and it's been devastating that just come February, kids that are having issues with learning and on 504s have recently been told that they cannot come back to school. Now, as a school committee, we all are working for kids, and we want to put the kids first, and we all talk about this idea of children, education, let them flourish. We don't want to overwhelm them. As a 6, 7-year-old who's on a 504 or an IEP, or vice versa, now they have to leave their friends, meet new friends, and then get onto a new school midway through a year. I think it's something that needs to be looked at. I know based on the school committee's policies now, if that child was homeless or they were a freshman in high school, they would have the capability of staying. And I think that the policy needs to be reevaluated and make it up to the parents, and not just 2 people. Thank you.
Okay, we ready for the next question? Catherine?
Each year, as the superintendent begins to prepare his annual recommended budget, he asks the school committee to identify several budget priorities. What budget priorities would you identify for fiscal year 2026?
Okay, we'll begin this time with Ms. McLaughlin.
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest challenges we have in terms of budgeting and prioritizing is we really need to make sure we don't lose sight of our district goal of achieving excellence in all its forms. So academic, extracurricular, and financial, while also meeting the needs of all of our learners. Some of the most critical things we need to stay focused on are addressing the needs of our multilingual learner population, which has been growing over the years, both in terms of size and the number of home languages that are spoken. Continuing to establish and foster innovation pathways at the high school level to ensure that all students have enriching academic experiences. Continuing to understand the strengths and weaknesses of our special education services and programs, where those need to be bolstered and where we have true strengths, as well as continuing to provide high-quality professional development for our teachers and staff to help them diversify their teaching and meet the needs of all of our learners. Thank you.
Mr. Garino?
So I second what you're saying about the pathways at the high school. I think it's great. Having grown up in Reading, we didn't have that opportunity to have these pathways where if you wanted to be on a health science or you wanted to do social media, I think that's phenomenal. And I think that is a huge plus that I didn't experience, but my kids will. English as a second language is huge. The population has doubled, so I absolutely agree with that. Things that I do think that they could work on, and we could work on as in this budget, is bringing early second language to 5th, maybe even 6th grade. Our surrounding towns are actually bringing in Spanish, French at a younger age. It's something that we have not done. Actually, it hasn't changed since I went to school, and I didn't start learning Spanish till I was in 7th grade. So that was a long time ago, so we do need to work on implementing that change. The only other change I really think we need to work on with this budget is in the high school, these tracks are different. We have tracks for AP, honors, and then we have college prep. When I was going to school, there was a different track where you had high college prep and college prep. And so when you look at these bell curves, a lot of this bell curve is being taught in one area. So you have a select group of people at AP, and then you have honors, and then there's the rest. So that track, I think, needs to be divided, and so we should work on that budget too. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Brandt.
Yeah, I think for me, I think there are a couple of things. One is we've been doing a lot of work around how do we create more time on learning for students, which is a big challenge. We certainly meet the thresholds and so forth, but our students would benefit from having additional time on learning, being able to add additional, electives, but that would probably be a prerequisite to adding foreign language instruction in earlier years, for instance. So that's one place. A second place, which is related, is around the flexibility of our scheduling, right? So our scheduling is just fundamentally not flexible enough for our students. They often have to make difficult trade-off decisions in terms of their course selection, particularly at the high school level. And while there's work to do to look at sort of the schedule at a macro level to create more flexibility, where you would also get some bang for the buck, if you will, is if you were able to offer more sections of certain classes that are popular or oversubscribed or just not able to be offered enough times throughout the schedule. And so both of those, I think, are critical priorities for our students to give them, the flexibility and to meet their academic needs, meet them where they are, that would certainly have budget implications that we would need to consider.
Thank you. Third question, Ms. Robertson.
Even with a rigorous community process, as a member of the school committee, you will have significant input into the Killam Elementary School building project. What needs do you hope to see the new school address?
And we'll start with Dana Garino.
So, having grown up in this town, having gone to Killam, and having seen my daughter play in that gymnasium is the same gymnasium that I grew up playing in. So I 100% support revamping that school system and revamping the school itself. I think a huge benefit, depending on budget allowance and what I was reading, is it could be $150 million. Hopefully we could get $75 million from state. Would be a huge difference if we could bring a lot of the RISE program from the high school and implement that into the Killam program itself. So now you've brought all these kids from RISE and now they're in the elementary school itself. I think that school is a big issue that needs to be revamped, and I'm hoping that over the next few years we can start the process. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, next we move to Sean Brandt.
Yeah, a few things. So, I first of all, I agree with Dana's comment. I think if there's an opportunity for us to centralize the RISE program in one facility, I think that would be a huge benefit for those students, really build a community around the preschool program. My own daughter, my youngest daughter, went to RISE for 1 year at Killam and 1 year at Woodend, just because of the particular schedules that were offered, and it would have been really nice to have her be in one location and really build a community there. So I totally agree with that. The other thing that I think we need to be thinking about with the new Killam school, part of the MSBA funding formula allows up to 4% for if we meet certain stretch efficiency goals, right? So energy efficiency goals and things like that. Often, if you're looking at maybe an improvement to your home, you can see the decrease in operating costs down the line, or the sort of annual spend down the line, but that expense up front to be able to fund solar panels or a geothermal system or whatever it might be can often feel really burdensome. If we can get an additional 4% reimbursement from the state, that might help offset some of the initial investment and really help this building be much more efficient to run. Our buildings in town are very old. We have massive utility expenses, as folks know, and so it'd be great if Killam sort of broke from that mold. And then the final thing is, it just needs to be a building that functions better. If you've spent time in Killam, the sort of central library, it's kind of ringed by all the classrooms. It makes it really difficult for that building to function the way that a modern elementary school needs to function. Not to mention the fact that it's surrounded by 2-tiered steps and is not particularly accessible. We've learned a lot about school design and school buildings over the last 50 plus years, and I know the new building will reflect that as well.
Thank you. And finally, Sarah McLaughlin.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm currently on the Killam School Building Committee as a member. So as a reminder to the Reading community, Killam was built in 1969, and we haven't done any significant renovations since then. I think everybody's aware there's lead in the drinking water. It's not ADA compliant. There's water infiltration in parts of the building as well. We lack modern fire suppressant systems. And I think also a huge reason as well, the building layout did not evolve to meet the needs of modern day instruction. So I think in the new building, things that Dana and Sean have already mentioned, in addition to addressing the physical and mechanical issues that we're encountering at Killam, implementing energy efficiency goals, having a space for pre-K, bringing our special education programs back into that building. We've had to move them out because of the ADA compliance and other issues. But primarily, I'd really like to see a modern space that is flexible and will evolve with teaching and learning as those practices evolve as well, so we can be using the spaces differently over time.
Thank you. We'll return to Catherine Robertson for another question.
Excuse me. One of the roles of the school committee is to advocate for the Reading Public Schools. What can you do as a member of the school committee to help seek out additional resources of support for the Reading Public Schools?
And let's start with Sean.
Yeah, so there are a few things. One is advocating on the town side, right? So we have a complicated decision to make every year in terms of how the budget is allocated between the schools and the town. And we talked earlier about full-day kindergarten. One of the ways that we're able to set ourselves on the path to achieving tuition-free full-day kindergarten is by advocating with the town to help support that via community priority. When Fidel Maltez, our prior town manager, joined us, I met with him within days of him arriving here, and the primary thing we talked about was full-day kindergarten, how far behind we were, and how much we needed to address that. And we were able to get a community priority of $150,000 a year to help support that transition. So there's the town side of it. The other side is with our legislators, right? We are fortunate that Jason Lewis, our state senator, is the chair of the Joint Education Committee, so he's in a very influential role there. I've invested heavily over the years in maintaining a relationship with him and our other our other state level legislators in order to make sure that the needs of the Reading community are represented when they're thinking about policy and regulatory questions and funding formulas and all those sorts of things. Those are all great opportunities for us that are critical for us as school committee members to support.
Thank you. Dana.
So I do agree, and I commend you guys over the last few years of working towards this full-day kindergarten. It was a difficult decision for me and my wife when our kids were going through it. But yes, this is a challenge, especially when almost 6,000 people in this town do not have kids in the system, and we are asking for support, and we want them to support our kids, which we do have in the system. So that can be challenging. Some things that we can do is social media. That is a huge component nowadays in getting out there and celebrating the good things that we have had in this town. I have friends of mine whose daughters are on the field hockey team and my sons are on the lacrosse team, and when you win these championships, you want to celebrate that. You want to express that. And when you have this feeling of a community and the town is one, then you feel like you're in it, even though your kids aren't in the system. Now the community has gotten behind everyone, and you feel like you're one together. So I think that's a huge thing, celebrating accomplishments, achievements. We can post flyers or set things out when kids make it into these Ivy League schools. So you want a sense of this is your community, and you have pride in this community, whether you have a kid in the school system or not. Thank you.
And the same question, Sarah.
Thank you. I think, Sean, you already touched on this a little bit, but in terms of collaborating across a town and schools is really critical, particularly from a fiscal responsibility standpoint. Helping establish connections with local community colleges and other academic institutions for central office and building leadership. Relationships with our legislators, which you had mentioned as well. And that's particularly important when it comes to identifying, applying for possible grants for schools to expand access to things like the innovation pathways or composting pilots and things like that. And I think one of the things that I do think is really important, and we can continue to grow in this area, is building relationships with people in town who either don't have kids in the Reading Public Schools yet or have kids that graduated. They're really one of the biggest voices for change and the importance of having strong public schools in our district.
Thank you. Another question.
What role do you believe the Reading Public Schools should take to combat substance abuse amongst students, and what can you do as a member of the school committee to help the Reading Public Schools be successful in this endeavor?
This time we'll start with Mr. Garino.
So, it's funny, substance abuse, we think about this, and as things have changed over the years, I like to think, has the curriculum of what we taught our children changed? Probably not, right? We've learned about it back in the day when I was growing up about, this is your brain on drugs. This is your brain, what it looks like when it's not on drugs. What's changed is the culture. There's been a huge shift in culture. And so now younger kids are getting more involved in drugs. And the statistics show that most families in this country have been affected by either a drug overdose in their family or friend. So I do think we can implement things early on in our policies. So we do have implemented social emotional learning for kids, where they sit around in a circle and they talk about empathy and compassion, and this is even done at the elementary school level. Now, implementing some sort of education on how drugs are bad, how they can lead to as gateway drugs, and how they can influence your brain is something that should be thought about and changed, and I think would make a huge difference in children. The other thing we need to look at is what has changed. Why are we still having a substance abuse problem? Where did this start? It doesn't start when you're in high school, it starts when you're younger. You know, is it stress? Is it home life? Is it a socioeconomic problem? We need to get to the root cause of that and figure out what that problem is. And the best way to get to that root cause is to look at it when they're young in elementary school and not wait till later on in life. Thank you.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Absolutely, thank you. We've had the pleasure of having the Coalition come and RPD come and present some of the YRBS data, Youth Risk Behavior Survey data to us, and it's really quite startling, particularly in some subgroups in our students. As Dana had said, I think one of the biggest things we can do as a school committee is have strong social emotional learning curricula, particularly focusing on behavioral and stress management techniques. Our partnerships with RPD and the Coalition are really important, connecting kids to resources. And then I think one of the other big aspects, really making sure our policies around social media use and abuse and having kind of follow-up consequences to that, for particularly high school, but also in middle school students as well, to make sure we're not glorifying and encouraging that kind of behavior.
Thank you. Mr. Brandt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Dana and Sarah articulated. I think, the social emotional learning that we do start right from the beginning is really important in terms of helping kids, learn to be empathetic, learn to understand what their friends are going through, maybe being somebody who can help flag a problem, before it hopefully spirals into a serious substance abuse issue. Something very tactically that we do is the Youth Risky Behavior Survey, which essentially tries to understand the scope and scale and the nature of some of the challenges that we might have in the schools around substance abuse, but other sort of risky behaviors as well. And then two things that I think we have in place that one we've implemented more recently, and then one we've had for a long time, which attempt to address some of these challenges. One is we have school adjustment counselors, which we've now added in. We have almost a one-to-one in all of our schools, but we have coverage in each of our schools. School adjustment counselors are there just to be, somebody to help identify, the students who may be struggling, provide support for them, provide interventions for them in a professional way, a skilled professional way, which I think is really important that we have that in each building. And then the second piece is our SROs. And I know, people have differences of opinion, may have differences of opinion about the presence of police officers in the schools. Our SROs are fantastic. Officer Lewis and Officer Vatcher are truly members of those communities in the schools. They get to know the kids really, really well. And they're there not to get kids in trouble, but because they've got the expertise to help identify when a kid may be struggling or maybe trending in the wrong direction or getting involved in the wrong things. And so, our great partnership with the RPD and the SROs is a critical part of addressing this as well.
Great. Okay, question number 6. Ms. Robinson.
Although Reading recently completed negotiations with the Reading Teachers Association, several districts in the region have had issues regarding contract negotiations with their teachers' unions. What can be done to make sure we avoid these problems in Reading?
And we'll begin with Sarah.
Excellent. So I think one of the things that really contributed to our ability to avoid kind of a contentious relationship, strikes, and other circumstances that other districts encountered, I think the short answer is collaboration and trust, along with a multi-year fiscal plan that aligns with our district strategic plan. The trust that we've been able to build between central office staff, our union representatives, and school committee has been really imperative to having mutually respectful conversations where everybody feels like they're heard and that their roles are validated.
And same question, Sean.
Yeah, I think where we are right now is a model for how you do it. And Sarah alluded to a lot of it. It's about collaboration and trust. It's not just the RTA, but all but one of our unions are now settled for the period that starts in July, starting in July. So a lot of these towns where you're seeing strikes, they're going months and months past the expiration of a contract. and we're well ahead of ours, and we expect to have good news on the final one pretty soon here as well. So the collaboration has been a big part of it. We also, and Sarah alluded to this, I was a member of the bargaining team in this cycle, and one of the things that we did was come very transparently to them with, here's what our budget looks like over the next few years, here's what we reasonably can sort of afford, and let's talk with you about sort of the right mix of financial components of this contract and non-financial components that get us to a place that's affordable, sustainable, doesn't put us in a position where we're overcommitting and having to lay off staff, as many neighboring towns have had to do. We were able to be really transparent with the unions about what we can do and how we can get there. That was through preparation, it was through planning, it was through really strong partnership with the town and the finance committee to put us in a good position. It was through just being candid with the unions about, our tax base makes it more challenging for us than some other districts you may look at, and so we're going to do the best that we can. We're going to be honest with you about what those boundaries are, and we're going to land at a fair contract, and we were able to do that with our unions this time around.
Dana, the same question.
Having not sat on the school committee and gone through these finances, I do agree with everything you guys are saying in regards to the transparency. It helps to say, hey, this is the numbers, these are objective data, this is what we have, this is what you want, can we meet in the middle? There's no hidden agenda. I think having a really great superintendent right now who is someone who feels like he's in it with you and someone that you can go to and talk to and is a leader in this community has made a huge difference. And I think teachers feel that when you have someone who the buck stops with them, they feel like they're in it with you and they're working with you as a colleague and not just as a boss. And I think that played a huge role, and I commend you guys for doing such a good job on that.
Okay, we ready for another question?
The costs to the district for special education continue to be a significant portion of the overall budget. What strategies do you believe the school committee can use to help contain these costs?
And we'll begin with Sean Brandt.
Yeah, I love this question. This is right in my wheelhouse as a former finance committee member as well. We've been talking for a long time about what we call invest to save strategies, and one of those strategies that we've been actively exploring and sort of looking for opportunities on is bringing more students back to the district who are in out-of-district placements, which are particularly expensive for the district. It not only generates cost savings for us and is sort of a more affordable model, but more importantly, it brings the student back home, right? If the student's academic needs or whatever needs they might have can be met here in the district, I think we all firmly believe that's better than having them have to, get on a bus and travel to another town to get those services or get that support. So those invest to save opportunities are huge for us. We just continue to look for more of those from a programmatic perspective in terms of the services and offerings that we have here in the town.
Next up is Sarah McLaughlin.
Absolutely. So I'll echo what Sean was saying about looking for opportunities to reduce those costs. So there's an extensive body of research showing that high quality early intervention for kids at risk is not waiting for them to fail, essentially, in intervening early. There's actually a cost savings there in terms of reducing special education spending over time. So looking for those opportunities, continuing to work on improving our ability to identify those kids. There's a Massachusetts state law called Child Find where we are required to identify those children and intervene early. So continuing to improve the ways that we're doing that here in the district. Continuing the work that was started last year, I believe, to conduct program reviews for all of our special education programs and in teaching, including the learning centers, where a lot of kids do receive their special education services, so we can better understand our strengths, where our gaps exist, areas for growth, and how we can better support our teachers in supporting their students as well.
Okay, and finally, Dana Garino.
So I think I agree, and keeping kids in district has two benefits, right? So financially you benefit because it's cheaper, but social emotional benefits for those children is great, right? Now they're with their friends, they're with their colleagues, they're with those kids that they grew up with. So that is huge. A huge financial cost is the special education, and it's 1/10 of the cost per child if they're caught between 1st and 4th grade. So early detection in the needs of a child is great for the child, number one, right? So now we know that their brains are more malleable, so now that they can change their pathways of learning, so now that they're more apt to come off of the IEP 504 early on. Then, when you look at that long-term wise, on a longitudinal scale, if that's detected in high school, the cost is almost 10 times more to the budget than the cost would have been if it was caught in elementary school. So early detection is huge. And I think that's a big component in what we need to keep working on.
Thank you. Another question, Catherine.
What do you plan to do to help advocate for the Killam project with the voters once the direction for the project has been decided?
And we'll begin with Ms. McLaughlin.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing I mentioned earlier about in terms of advocating for Reading Public Schools in general, of how we, in terms of budget resources, just really building those connections with people in town, particularly people who've had children come through the Reading Public Schools and see the value and ask them to help be a voice in the community. I think when you're not in the trenches every day with a kid in school, in some way you lose sight a little bit of what's happening in town. So unless you're actively making the effort to be involved, often people don't even really have a sense of what's happening. So helping to be that bridge for people whose kiddos have graduated and the people who are coming up, and why that's so important for us.
Thank you. Mr. Garino.
I couldn't agree more. The communication between the people like myself and everyone up here that have children involved and have skin in the game, and then bridging that gap between my parents' friends that still live in town. And so as you see this community and the great community it was growing up, my friends growing up, but as you get older, your kids aren't in it. And so that everyone's saying, well, why is this going to cost so much, right? Well, we want the next generation to flourish like my generation flourished. And so getting out there, talking to families, talking to your friends, talking to your friends' parents, but also celebrating all the accomplishments in this town and making it a town that you have pride in, and that there's a huge accomplishment to live here. And most of the parents and most of my friends' parents that came here for the schools, right? So you said, oh, I'm going to go to Reading. Why are you going to move to Reading? Well, because they have a great school system, they have great sports. We want our kids to flourish. And so those people still live here. And so you need to get back to that and say, hey, the same reason why you moved here is the same reason why we're doing a new building for Killam, because we want the same accomplishments and the same opportunities that we had growing up. Thank you.
All right, Sean Brandt.
I think there are a few things. You know, along the way, part of it is getting to the people that are most likely to be detractors once we get there, right? And so I think about the abutters in particular, the neighbors in particular. We were in a meeting recently, a school committee meeting recently, and it came up that one of the upcoming public meetings was around traffic and the impact of a new building on traffic and patterns and flows and whatnot. You know, and I raised, you know, this is an opportunity for us to proactively contact all the abutters and make sure that they're aware of these, you know, aware of this meeting in particular, but all of the meetings, so that they can participate and add their voice and hopefully get to a point where they're all going to be supportive when the time comes. Katie, I think your question was about what are we going to do once the direction is set, like what are we going to do to advocate for it? So it's interesting that neither the schools nor the school committee can formally advocate for a ballot question, which is the form this will come to the town in, is a debt exclusion question. But as individuals, we can. And so I expect that a ballot question committee will be stood up as we get there. And I will, you know, I'll be out there knocking on doors, dropping off flyers, you know, emailing my friends and neighbors, making phone calls, texting folks, all the things you have to do, not only to help people understand the importance of the project, but to get out the vote when the time comes, because that's really critical to getting this project passed.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Catherine Robertson.
Not including Killam, and if budget was not a consideration, what is the -- initiative you would like to see undertaken in our school district?
And we'll begin with Dana.
Okay, this is a great question. So having 3 kids that are going to Joshua Eaton now and now going to be moving to Parker, one of the huge initiatives that I would like overseen over the next 3 years would be the discrepancy gap between Coolidge and Parker, particularly after the 3 years. So if you look at it longitudinally, even prior to COVID, there was about a 20% discrepancy gap in mathematics and about 15% discrepancy gap in the English. So when you look at these gaps, and it's all objective data, as the children leave Joshua Eaton, they're above the state standard. As they leave Parker, they drop a little bit below the standard. And so this has been occurring over the last 5 to 6 years now. Coolidge, on the other hand, does continue to flourish and accelerate slightly. So that would be a huge issue that I would like to work on and see if we can close that gap and not make the kids that are flourishing come down to the kids that are not doing as well, but raise the kids up so we all can accomplish a greater goal. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Sean.
So I think, that's a very appropriate focus. So I'll go a different direction. It's interesting you say, if budget weren't a constraint, because then you can really get pie in the sky. But I'm going to bring it down just a tiny bit. For me, it's probably the math pathways work that we've been doing. Folks may not know the context around this, but your ability to access upper level math courses in high school is essentially dictated by how well you do in your 6th grade math class. I think we can all understand intuitively that not every kid who's capable of performing well in a high school advanced class is crushing it in 6th grade, right? And so we are actively exploring ways to create more entry points to an advanced math curriculum that don't put the pressure on the student to take a summer course or double up on math and give up on other priorities they may have from a scheduling perspective. So for me, it would be, laddering up on math coaching and support to build on the excellent new curriculum that we have in place, and ensuring that more kids are ready in 6th grade, but that those kids that aren't have many, many additional entry points to get to advanced math by the time they reach the end of high school.
Thank you very much. And finally to Sarah.
Awesome. It's really fun to think about a budget that doesn't have constraints and all the things we can do considering where we are in the budget cycle. So just kind of echoing what Sean and Dan have already said, the current school committee really pushed the administration hard, ringing alarm bells at some really concerning trends we were seeing as a district and instilling a sense of urgency there, particularly as it relates to ELA and math. One of the biggest opportunities that actually came out of COVID was our ability to leverage ARPA funds to replace the ELA curriculum at the K-5 level with something that was evidence-based and aligns to the essential components of reading. As Dana and Sean already said, in terms of math, we've seen a lot of discrepancies. I've said this in a couple other forums as well, that, a test in the 6th grade shouldn't impact the outcome of your future PhD dissertation. So making sure that kids are not locked into a specific track as young as 11 and 12 years old. So if I didn't have to stick to a budget, I think my number one initiatives would be replacing all the ELA curricula in one fell swoop. So we've done that at K-5. We're starting to look at those at the middle school level, so replacing those as well. And looking at what we're doing at the high school level, I would hire additional math coaches across the district, as well as expanding tracks. You mentioned this previously, Dana, expanding back, having multiple different tracks at the high school level across the curriculum, including additional innovation pathways, and particularly in math.
Well, thank you very much. Well, with the questions complete, it's time for our closing statements. As I said earlier, we're going to keep the same order as with the opening, so we begin with Dana Garino.
Okay. In closing, I'd like to thank RCTV, the moderator, the members of the media, and my fellow candidates for coming out this evening and participating in this forum. I also want to thank all those who have supported me along the way, family, friends, the late-night emails and texts for encouragement. It goes noticed. It's a difficult challenge going up against 2 incumbents, but I hope I have earned your vote, and more importantly, your trust. This role requires active listening skills and the ability to understand complex data and distill it into information that can be used to make good decisions. This is what I do every day as a part of my practice of medicine. While I am far from a great orator, by electing me, the opportunity we'll be gaining is someone who doesn't know what it's like to quit. You'll never get an excuse, but you always get dedication and passion behind everything I do. Of course, I'm going to make mistakes. They're going to be inevitable. We all make them along our journey. I have always acknowledged the most important, we always are going to acknowledge that the most important thing you can do is learn from your mistakes and get better. Keeping excellence, perseverance as a core value in the education system is something I will continue to advocate for. Working on better transparency between school and parents needs to be a top priority effort for the school committee, along with closing the education gap between our 2 middle schools. Thank you, and I'm asking for your vote on March 5th.
Thank you. Closing statements, Sarah McLaughlin.
Thanks, Alan. So we've achieved a lot over the last 3 years that I've been on the school committee, but we still have a lot of really exciting work ahead of us. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to continue the collaboration with my fellow school committee members and our amazing district leadership team. Voting for me in the upcoming election means you will continue to have a voice on the school committee that's focused on education, is knowledgeable about gen ed and special education, listens to all sides of a discussion, makes independent data-informed decisions, and is highly collaborative. So in closing, I want to thank you for joining the discussion tonight from home and here in the room. I welcome hearing from any of you in the community in the days leading up to the election and answering any of your additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And final comments, Sean Brandt.
Great. So thank you, Alan, once again for moderating, Katie for the great questions, RCTV for hosting us, and Sarah and Dana for the great discussion tonight. I opened this evening by talking about how proud I was of the accomplishments of our committee over the last few years, and I want to close by talking about how excited I am about being part of the important work that still lies ahead. You heard a lot of this reference throughout the evening, but we know there's work to do in terms of improving the curricula at the middle school level. We have achievement gaps we must close between the middle schools, but also for subgroups like students on IEPs and students from low-income families. The Killam project is critically important to the educational future of this town, and we have to get that right while also being excellent stewards for taxpayers in Reading. We need to get creative about finding more time on learning and more flexibility in scheduling so that all of our students can have their academic needs met. We know there's plenty of work to do, but I absolutely believe we have the right leadership in place to keep the momentum going. We have a phenomenal administrative team that's all pulling in the same direction. We have a highly functional school committee who's backing them up, but also holding them accountable for keeping up the pace of progress. On a personal level, I've learned a ton over the last 4 years, and I would love to be able to keep applying all of that learning on behalf of Reading students. So thank you to everyone at home for watching, and I ask that you please consider casting a vote for Sean Brandt on or before March 5th. Thank you.
Great. Well, we have reached the end of the forum. In closing, I thank all three candidates for stepping up to serve the town of Reading and for taking the time at this forum to share views and vision with the citizens. I thank Catherine Robertson of the Post. Thanks to Phil Rushworth and the rest of the staff and volunteers here at RCTV. You're the ones that made all of this happen. Finally, I urge everyone to get out and vote in the election. Early voting has already started this past Saturday, and it runs through Friday at the town hall on the first floor conference room. The election day is Tuesday, March 5th. Polls are open at the field house from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. This is your chance to share your future with the town of Reading and to have a direct say in how the town is operated. Don't miss your opportunity to exercise your right and responsibility. Thank you for watching.